At some point, something changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically. They still reply, they still smile, they still say the right things. But the energy is gone. You feel it before you understand it. A subtle shift, a delay that wasn't there before, a warmth that cooled without explanation. Most people obsess over what they did wrong. They replay conversations. They analyze tone. They search for a moment that caused the distance. But interest rarely disappears because of a single mistake. It fades for quieter reasons. And that's what makes it so difficult to detect. This video isn't about rejection. It's about something more uncomfortable. How interest decays without conflict, without drama, without awareness. People don't wake up one morning and decide to stop caring. Interest erodes slowly through patterns that feel harmless while they're happening. And most people only recognize the loss when it's already complete. In this episode, we'll break down how familiarity drains emotional tension, why predictability kills curiosity, how availability quietly lowers value, and why trying harder often accelerates disinterest. This isn't advice on how to be liked. It's an explanation of how attention actually works. Interest is fueled by tension. Interest requires contrast, something unknown, something unresolved, something slightly out of reach. When everything is clear, accessible, and explained, tension disappears. And without tension, attention collapses. This doesn't mean people enjoy confusion. It means the human brain stays engaged when there's space left to interpret. Mystery isn't about secrecy. It's about not filling every gap. When you explain everything you feel, think, and intend, you remove the room where interest lives. Familiarity feels safe, not engaging. Familiarity reduces alertness. The brain stops scanning, stops questioning, stops leaning forward. This is why interest fades even in positive relationships. Nothing is wrong, but nothing is activated anymore. Predictability creates comfort, but comfort rarely creates curiosity. People don't disengage because you became worse. They disengage because you became fully known. Availability changes. Perceive value. Availability feels kind, reliable, supportive. But psychologically, constant availability removes urgency. When someone knows you're always there, replies feel optional, effort feels unnecessary, attention feels guaranteed, and anything guaranteed stops being protected. This isn't cruelty, it's cognitive economy. The mind allocates attention where loss feels possible. Interest declines before awareness appears. Here's the uncomfortable part. People usually lose interest before they realize it. They don't consciously decide to pull away. They just stop investing. Less curiosity, less emotional presence, less initiative. By the time they notice the distance, it already feels justified. This is why explanations rarely come, because there was no single moment to explain. Over-consistency feels emotionally flat. Consistency is framed as a virtue, but emotional systems don't respond to flat lines. They respond to rhythm, variation, contrast. When every interaction feels the same, the emotional signal weakens. Not because it's bad, but because it's no longer informative. The brain stops tagging it as important. Effort doesn't restore interest. This is where most people make things worse. They sense the distance and they compensate. More messages, more explanations, more emotional output. But effort without tension feels like pressure. Instead of reigniting interest, it confirms imbalance. The other person doesn't feel pulled closer, they feel managed. Interest can't be negotiated. Interest isn't logical. You can't argue it back. You can't convince it. You can't earn it through consistency alone. Interest responds to perception, not intention. That's why being good doesn't guarantee engagement, and being available doesn't secure attachment. The system doesn't reward effort, it responds to stimulus. Emotional saturation ends. Curiosity. When everything is shared, nothing is discovered. Constant emotional transparency removes anticipation. There's no build-up, no pause, no curiosity gap. The mind stops asking questions, and attention drifts elsewhere. Not because something better appeared, but because something less saturated did. Distance is often a signal, not a strategy. People interpret withdrawal as manipulation. Most of the time, it's not. It's an instinctive response to emotional flatness. Distance isn't always about avoidance. Sometimes it's the system searching for stimulation again, and when none appears, disengagement completes itself. Why this feels personal, but isn't. When interest fades, it feels like a judgment, like a verdict on your value. But interest doesn't measure worth, it measures psychological activation. People disengage from things they still respect. They drift from people they still like, because liking and interest are not the same mechanism. The illusion of trying harder. Trying harder feels productive, but in attention systems, escalation often signals imbalance. When one side increases effort and the other doesn't, interest doesn't rise. It relocates, silently. Interest thrives in space, not control. Interest needs breathing room, moments without explanation, pauses without reassurance, distance without anxiety, not as tactics, but as natural byproducts of self-contained behavior. People are drawn toward what doesn't collapse toward them. When interest fades, most people look backward. They search for mistakes, but interest rarely disappears because of damage. It disappears because nothing is happening anymore. No tension, no contrast, no unanswered signals. Understanding this doesn't give you control over others. It gives you clarity. And clarity prevents you from chasing explanations that never existed.